We are tonight's entertainment.
You can't handle the truth.
The fire rises.
Pizza time.
You're a wizard, Harry.
So it begins.
You know how much I sacrifice?
You think that's air you're breathing?
Groovy.
I don't have friends. I got family.
We are Sex People! 1, 2, 3, 4!
Craft Services.
Hey, Trent.
Hi, Parth.
You're looking lovely.
You're looking well. We have a film podcast.
We do.
For better, for worse. What have you been eating?
Well, Trent, I went to a coffee shop with friend of the show, Sophia Alexis. I had to do some work. Sophia had to do some works. And Sophia likes to go, sometimes we'll go to the library, sometimes we'll go to a coffee shop, do some work, bring our laptops, etc.
Leaving the domicile, I feel like helps the brain do some work sometimes.
It sure does.
Maybe that's placebo.
And she purchased a hot chocolate for me and a pain au chocolat and some banana bread, and we split it.
You saying the French translation threw me, but by pain au chocolat, do you mean a chocolate croissant?
Basically, yes.
So hot chocolate, a chocolate croissant, what was the other thing?
Banana bread.
Oh, banana.
Oh, wow. Right before we started recording, we were talking about...
I was joking about the Stop and Shop self-checkout voice, and I said, I did, scan your bananas. So here we are. But that sounds delicious.
Yeah, it was really good.
What'd you get? You willing to share that?
I mean, we split the food. She just got a coffee. A latte.
No caffeine necessario? Party?
I mean, I don't have coffee. I don't like coffee.
But do you ever rarely partake? Because I sort of am a rare coffee drinker, and then when I do, my brain is like zzz, zzz, and then I like enjoy the morning. So do you ever take it every once in a while?
No, I never have coffee. The thing I've started having more now is chai, because my dad always has chai, and so now I more regularly make it for myself as like a morning thing to have. But I really do not like the taste of coffee. Hear
me out. Have you ever put like a stupid amount of like creamer in there?
I have. I've put a lot, like I've done everything, but then it comes to a point where it's like, I could make this with so much milk and sugar to the point of unrecognizability. Or I could
milk
just
and
have
sugar
tea.
Only gets you so far. If you can get like a super sweet creamer that tastes
but
like
then you're having so much sugar. It's just like really not good for you at that point.
Yeah, it's true. Well, the next sentence out of my mouth was going to be that tea, and there's probably plenty of articles about this, is probably in every way the healthier alternative.
Yeah, that's sort of my reasoning behind it. But Trent, what have you been eating most recently?
I just had some chips and guac, and then before that, I was sitting here getting ready to record and thinking back on what I had eaten and thinking, oh, it had been so long. How am I going to recount the details? And then my mom just flew in with some like vanilla wafers, or not, or it's like I don't know. That makes it sound like Nilla wafers, which are like the circular things.
No, I know what you're talking about.
It's like sort of Kit Kat style wafer.
Yeah.
But
well, that's what I thought of first. I didn't think of the
Okay. We can talk about this off air. But sometimes it's hard to tell whether you're just super hungry and desperate or if something's really good. Because I like went up to her after and I was like, we always should have these in the house. They're subtle. The vanilla is, as I mature, gets better and better, and chocolate is starting to stay the same.
But Trent, we've been talking about what we've had most recently, but are you excited for what's to come?
Parth, we came from different places. We come from different backgrounds. We have different experiences, different taste, and usually it's like trying to find out. It's a guessing game. But tonight, we know one thing for sure. Our bodies and our palates will...
This is going in a direction
will
I could not have
collide
anticipated.
in such a colossal way, and you should reveal what that might be.
Well, I and other friends of the show, Sarah Brotman, Jackson Clark, and Sophia Alexis, and maybe Chloe Ditloff, we'll see, are having a little Halloween party, and I am making Parth's famous wings.
I forget how did this joke start? I love that it exists.
This joke started because I one time was like, oh, I'll make nachos. And then you and Jackson made fun of me because I was excited to make nachos for you guys. And
I see nothing wrong with this so far. I like nachos.
I don't think you needed to see anything wrong with it. I think you and Jackson saw an opportunity to beat down on me and sort of pounced. Anyways, we bought like bad Mexican cheese. Like, not that the Mexican cheese was like moldy or anything. It just like wasn't up to snuff. And when I made the nachos, I was like, it's not great. And then you and Jackson, after all this hype that you had created for my nachos, went, it's not living up to the hype, Parth. Fuck your nachos, bro. This fucking sucks. Bro, Parth's famous nachos fucking suck. Fuck you. And then I'm
sure that wasn't an exaggeration.
Like, genuinely no.
It was genuinely like 85% of that.
Anyways, I later redeemed myself, made Parth's famous nachos, and they were good. But then you guys still let it run. And then at another time, you and other friends of the show came over to my house and stayed over. And this time, I made wings. And you went, bro, Parth wasn't content enough making Parth's famous nachos. He's making Parth's famous wings now. Because I was making wings.
Whoa, me from 2 years ago is a really funny guy.
Yeah, he's really cracking you up. I made them and they were good. But that day, They were extremely spicy. They were really hot. But they were good.
Yeah, your wings required no
sauce.
Required no trial and error like your nachos.
Yeah.
There's no scapegoat like the Mexican cheese.
Okay.
Parth, I hear your cultural dog whistles, by the way. Watch it.
Well, I don't know where to take that. All right. But speaking of the end, we should get there quicker. So should we cue the intro? Welcome back to Craft Services, where we talk about the movies. Each week we talk about a film and hopefully have a crew member of that film to talk with us about their experience working on the picture. This week, who do we have, Trent?
Wait, this week we had cinematographer Benjamin Kraken, and wait, I'm forgetting. Wasn't he like super duper nice and like cool and like interesting?
He was extremely good. Trent, I have to say, I love all of our interviews, but I think this is a good one.
I think the movie was great. I think
we were doing pretty well with our questions.
I was just going to say we should not give ourselves... Hey, humble listener, don't let your expectation of this episode get too crazy high, but this is... Parth and I text each other afterwards and we were like, hey, friend, good job. Yeah. So that is what we thought of it. But yes, good job, Parth. I thought after 200 episodes, we're starting to figure this thing out.
It only took 203 episodes. But Benjamin Kraken, really, we could not have done it without him. And
yes, I think he was more important than our involvement. That's fair to say.
And I think I'd just like to cue him up right now. Cue the interview. Hello, everybody, and welcome to our interview with Benjamin Kraken. He's the cinematographer that's worked on such films as Beast, Promising Young Woman, and our film for today, Coralie Farjah's The Substance. Thank you so much for being with us today.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
So just to start off, what was your relationship with film at a young age?
I guess so. I grew up in the countryside of Scotland, very rural. We didn't have TV at that time. I mean, my family didn't have a TV. So I didn't, my relationship, I guess, began, I think I remember my mom took me to the cinema and we watched a film called The Bear. It was like an 80s film, actually a French film, which they re-released whilst I was shooting, or they re-released in 4K whilst I was shooting The Substance. So it was a kind of little full circle for me. That was a kind of me moment there. But anyway, it's sort of like a wildlife film, I guess, but they'd made a narrative of it, and it's the story of it's like an orphan bear who befriends an older bear, and they get away from some hunters, and that's kind of the story, you know. I guess like that first part is like, without knowing it or whatever, I guess there was like an emotional reaction at a young age to something I'm watching on a screen in a theater. So that kind of stayed with me. Like I said, I grew up in the countryside, spent my time like building rafts and playing with my brother and like, you know, building tree swings and falling off tree swings and getting into trouble. And it wasn't until my teenage years that growing up in the countryside is quite dull, and coinciding with getting a TV and a VCR recorder. And also my granddad had bought like a high-8 camera, and me and my brother started to like record some crazy stunts and things on that recorder. You know what I mean? Like it was kind of, I don't know if you guys had that. Well, that because YouTube and everything, but before all that, there used to be a show in the UK called You've Been Framed. And Well, You've Been Framed was basically like you're just watching accidents and laughing. You know what I mean? There's always like, it's a classic format.
Like American Funniest Videos.
Yeah, exactly. So they used to have a thing that if you sent in the funniest video, you'd get like $100 or like $200. So I spent a lot of those weekends as a teenager with a high-8 camera recreating stunts or accidents. You know, like on my bike, I hit the fence, I go over the fence, you know, that kind of stuff.
You were Tom Cruise at a young age.
Yeah, also like almost in hospital. But yeah. There was, so I think that was also in there. But, you know, that's like fun and hobbying and things like that. But I really started we did at that time also edit the pieces together, and just, it was like really, you know, how to be inventive with nothing, how to like try and get an effect or show it even to the family and then see how they react, you know, and things like that. And then at the same time, as I was recording, I loved a lot of stranger, like darker things. I would record through the night and then play it back. And you know what I mean? It was like there was a danger to some of it, you know, like you were looking for something you hadn't seen, a world you hadn't seen. It was like a window to a world I hadn't seen. I was in the middle of Scotland in a small farmhouse somewhere, and it was like, wow, what's this Videodrome thing, or what's this? And so it really took me down a path of properly sourcing and trying to get into like quite strange films, and that kind of stayed with me. And it all came together later. I went to art school in Edinburgh, and that's where it kind of like joined together.
And then is that where you found yourself on set or like working as then where'd you find yourself on set for the first time?
That was much, much later. Because I think now it's more clear, isn't it? I think people can see it from an early age. At that time, you know, I went there to kind of do photography. I didn't even know how you make a film apart from like these little clips or little fun things. And it was through that I discovered like my love of like working with film cameras, like 16mm, because they had a 16mm camera, and people would ask me to shoot things. And then all of a sudden you've shot a 10-minute film, and then you're like, oh, it's like that. And we all made our own films. And I still hadn't been in a professional set, not until I graduated and I started to, I did like a year where I was loading film and things like that. And that would have been my first time on an actual, but they would have been quite small sets in Scotland as well, you know, nothing like, in a funny way, I'd say my first proper time on a full set where it had everything, like the full on catering and everything, was actually my first drama job. You know, when I left films after that, because after art school, I then went to the National Film School to do cinematography, like to concentrate on cinematography. And that's where it really changed, you know. And then when I left there, I got this job, my first TV job, and I was the DP, a very young DP that no one was taking seriously at all.
Could you talk about your first feature film that you worked on as a cinematographer?
Oh yeah, the first film I did was that 2010, I think, possibly. It was something called The Comedian, and that was a film made in London. Tom Skolnick was the director. He was from the Drama Centre. He had studied at the Drama Centre, and it was an improvised film. I think that's part of. So it was all done. It was all in London. It was all improvised. There was no well, obviously there was no script, there was not really a schedule, there was not really, it was an experiment in a sense. You know, it was all locations. There were like small flats, there were comedy clubs, because one character was trying to be a comedian, the other character, they're all, it's like three artists living in London. It's very like fluid. It was really interesting because it was coming from the National Film School, where I'd spent like 2 years doing very technical things, like technically minded things, to make my first film, and then kind of put that aside because Tom just wanted to, it was very much about capturing the moment and capturing what's happening, and scenes would last an hour or an hour and a half. You know, I think Tom was, you know, like Joanna Hogg was like Tom's teacher at the drama center. So it was very like, it was from that world, but he had a much more fluid style, I guess. But it brought me, what was very interesting with that film was it gave me, it made me understand the performer, the actors, like so much more. You know, it was something, because I was so close. I was the one there with the camera, and it made me understand performance and maybe how to react to performance and work with it. And in a sense, yeah, be so close to it in that first-hand way. So it was really great for that.
So I want to pivot into our main topic of the day, the substance, and ask how you were first approached to work on it.
So the substance, yeah, that was, my agent sent me that script. That was back in 21, end of 21. Scripts are kind of tricky things for me. It takes me a while to read them and things, and I was looking a lot. I was reading a lot at the time, desperate to find something. And yeah, when the substance landed, it was just like, I think I read it twice in one go. You know, the kind of thing that you read and your partner's like, why are you still in your boxer shorts? And it's like 2 p.m, and you're like, I've just read this and it's totally amazing. It was just it stood out like a lot. I mean, because I don't know if it's written in a really, she writes in such a great way. It's so like visceral, you know what I mean? You read, and there's hardly any dialogue, but it's so kind of propulsive. You know, you could tell very quickly what that was about, what was happening. It was very clear. It had such a clear vision in a sense. And also it was wild. Yeah, the end was so wild. I was like, what is this? I got to meet on this. And then, yeah, I asked straight away if I could get a meeting. And I think at that time, yeah, Coralie Lewis, she maybe met like 4 DPs. And it took me, I think, 4 meetings to get that job. So it's not, Coralie's very, very thorough in a really good way. But that was, I don't think, you know, it was, as most jobs are, it's competitive. Yeah, I was really struck by, I think there was something I connected to. There was something from where I was from, what I'd been watching, the things I'd been working on, the kind of areas I'd been like mining and looking at. And, you know, which, yeah, I think probably started with Beast, which is with Michael, who I was at film school with, and Emerald seen Beast, and she asked me to do Promising Young Woman, and Promising Young Woman was a film that Coralie said she really liked, and I think that's why my name, maybe I was one of the 4, you know, so it kind of, there's like a through line, and I really liked that as well, and it was something that I was aware of and could see within my work, and I was really wanting to, like, I was like, wow, this really takes it further and takes it on. So that was the first, yeah, that was the, and I think it was like 3 Zooms at the time because it was still the old COVID.
During these meetings, were you ever making like a lookbook or a thing like that for her or anything? Or did that come after you like had secured the job?
No. I think when I really respond to a script, I really, I mean, it's so hard not to think about that, especially as a DP, I guess, or maybe everyone does. But I find it's so hard not to think about like, what images would be there or what it would be like, or so I get right. I really like kind of that the first impressions that I get, and I sort of I put together a whole little lookbook which I sent before the meeting to Coralie. Yeah, so she had it before, and then after that meeting she sent me her lookbook. Of course, that can go one of 2 ways. You know, that's not it's not always. But at the same time, it's good not to know
where you're coming from.
You know? Yeah, so I think all that stuff is really... And I'd kind of laid it out roughly, but I had it in as much of sort of a narrative form as I could, even if it's just still images. You know what I mean? If it would begin with one type of image or a billboard or something. And I think the last images I had in there was one from The Fly and there was one from Society. She sent me her lookbook and it was much more graphic and painted. It wasn't really from films. It was more like bold advertisements or collage stuff, which really gave a sense of like how kind of bold it was going to be, you know? And I think for me at that point, I just really wanted to know how far, like how we're going to achieve any of this. Because first of all, it's pretty crazy, you know, and it was really great. Corley would talk about how it was all going to be practical. That made it like even, you know, it was all the effects were going to be practical. It was all going to be on this. Yeah, when I read it, it was like, oh, well, we're going to shoot in LA. She was like, no, we're going to shoot on a stage in Paris.
Oh.
So there was a lot of like that, a lot of those kind of things. But yeah, that's how we first got chatting. Also, of course, I had seen Corley's first film. That's also very important because when you read something like The Substance and you're going to get involved in it, you want to know like we're going to go like all the way and how we're going to do that. And I think her first film really lays out that she's not, you know, she's the real, she's the real deal, and she's going to go the full way. Because there's often you would join a project and it's so disappointing if things get, you know, softened or rounded, or this is going to change and now that's not happening. And I just think, you know, and because film, it takes a lot to do it and it takes a lot from everyone, that you really want to hit the right ones, you know. So all of those elements together, yeah, I was totally in on that.
Can you talk about what films and directors were in conversation or who you were influenced by and wanting to bring to the table?
I'd say that only really came up in the very first conversation, like with the lookbook. And they were, as I said, there was like Society was there was like The Fly. Because Cronenberg obviously comes up with body horror. The Thing, also Showgirls, things like that, you know, things like how... But it wasn't, I don't remember, it's actually interesting on this one because sometimes some directors really like to go over references or watch films. And it isn't actually something that after that first conversation, we never really discussed ever again. We didn't ever discuss a film ever again after that. It wasn't ever... There were when I arrived in Paris and we had like our little offices in the studio, very close to the studio. There was a poster of The Fly in my room, so I like that.
The ultra wide lenses, and then like a lot of it's like a very stylistic movie. Can you talk about sort of you collaborating with the director on some of those visual decisions?
So again, going back to the script, it's written very visual, and there's a lot of pieces in there that you understand, like whether it's not written as like wide lens or there's nothing technical in the script, but things like just the way Harvey's written, let's say, you know that there's going to be some kind of, it's going to be up close, even though it's never written as a close-up kind of thing. And the way that kind of worked, because there was so much to do from prep, you know, from when we arrived, because it was all going to be built in Paris, and then there was going to be some locations in Paris, and then we were going to shoot every shot in the movie and all the close-ups. And so we started almost immediately like blocking little pieces, even with doubles or extras or people in the office, or we would stand in and we would map out like certain parts, like even the bathroom. I remember even one of the first days, me and Corley mapped out a kind of bathroom on the floor and then worked out like there should be the second bathroom. And Corley really likes to like go around it with the iPhone and like look at how shots might work, even if it's with someone standing in and things. So I would then take stills as well, and then we would like look at those. And it's from kind of that process that, because I'd never worked with Corley, she'd never worked with me, that you kind of somehow build up a language together that you're that you understand each other, where you're coming from, what's that close up. And I could see that she was moving very close, like going from very wide to like really close in and things like that. I'd say that the first sequence that I then started to test properly was actually the birth sequence. And I think just because it was like, how are we going to do that? And so we'd built it from many pieces in a way. And that was, I even asked to set up a test in the camera house in their test room. And we sort of did like a proper test. It was still very much with doubles and it wasn't full crew or anything. And it was like a sort of mirror that was just made out of a frame and some C-stands and things. But it really, I got the idea of like, I knew how close Corley was going, like to the face and to people. So it was from those experiments that I started to realize I'm going to need like a really wide lens that can go really super close. And what's available, and I just tested through all those lenses. And we shot it large, like on the LF. So there's not so many you can choose from at that end.
Just so we can get into it, because it's like one of the centerpiece scenes. Can you talk about shooting that whole bathroom sequence? Just because it's, everyone in the theater was reacting to that one.
Yeah, I think the bathroom sequence is one of the first. It's kind of where like you're either going to leave the theater or now you're in. Like one of those ones very early on. It's like it was. It's made up of like a few different sequences, obviously. The first part being with the actors and starts with Demi at the mirror, and that's the injecting the actual liquid. So there's anything that's with her is obviously with Demi, and then anything very close was actually done much later in what we called the lab, where we restaged like tiny pieces of all of the film and did all the close-ups. So that was like something I had to track, the lighting and all that kind of stuff. The arm the needle actually goes into is actually Corley's arm, because she wanted to do a real needle in an arm.
Wow.
So, no, you can't get anyone to do that, so you have to do it yourself. I think there's then the point where, she'll crash to the floor, and I think we're above, and that's actually Demi sort of writhing on the floor, and then we creep across the bottom, if I remember. And that's on like something called a skater scope. We went like low, and you can go like low to the ground and just crawl up. I think almost the back almost hits the lens, which is great. And then you were into another part of the lab, which is where the torso was sort of made, in prosthetics. And it would like break open. So I think which is mixed with the eye shot and so it's very, and then she's born. There's a whole other part, which is POV. So then we're into POV, and that's a whole other element when you're with Sue for the first time. And you come up to the mirror, and that's the double bathroom. So that's Sue's in the other bathroom, and that's me with the camera. And the double did all the hand stuff. So there was a little bit that was quite choreographed. That section took quite a while to work out, and how we were going to move together and work that out. And then the steam is put in, and that's a VFX element in there.
I've heard that there were like multiple, like you describe it as almost shooting 3 or 4 different movies because of how many different. Can you speak as to how like production was broken up? Like when you're talking about there was a section that was just all the close-ups in the movie? Yeah,
I think the easiest way so we started in Elizabeth's apartment, and that was built in the studio in north of Paris in Épinay, and it was that had living room, it had bedroom, it had bathroom, secret room, corridor, kitchen, and that was all made. And so was the studio, the TV studio corridor was made there as well. And then also on other stages there was Pump It Up and Sparkle Your Life and certain thing. And then what happened was, because again it's all France, as in we shot all the exteriors. Originally when I joined, there was talk of, okay, we'll fly you to LA and you can get actual exteriors, like proper exteriors. Of course, the shooting went on, possibly longer than it should have gone on, and money was, wasn't something that we had to be very specific And Corley wanted as many days as she could get, and maybe the LA thing just wasn't going to happen. So we were going to go down south to shoot. We were like, can we shoot it in, around Cannes and around Nice in the south of France, because it would save us like loads of money. So then there was this idea that we would have that. The major crew was for the studio and setting the studio and filming the studio. And then we would have a reduced crew that would go down and do the exteriors. And then we would come back to Paris and we would set up this lab, which would be an ultra reduced crew. So it's kind of like 3 shoots in a way. You could say maybe 4, because within that we had the theater, which is its own beast. So that was its own, because we built that to destroy it. You have to build it.
So I was wondering, the sort of like flashing lights sequence, I think it's right after she takes the substance for the first time. I was wondering if you were involved in sort of the discussions of what that would look like, or if that was more of a director or a VFX thing.
No, so that was, I was directly involved. The light tunnel, that was in the script. Again, it's very important to note on that everything, although, we're dealing with a what Corley always termed like LA of the mind, or the film exists in this illusionary space, which was very important to try and create. But everything you see, prosthetics, all the shot, everything's real. You know what I mean? So the light thing was always going to be real. And it was something that we continually, can't remember at what point we shot it, but it was not until right at the end in the lab that we shot it, and we tested numerous versions of that and what it would be and how it would be. And in the end, it's kind of like, it ended up being 2 sort of discs, circular discs, and we had like Astera tubes all the way around, and there was a chase put into them. In fact, the chase that's put in there is actually a shot, because you can load in a sequence. And the sequence is of the dragon, the flame of dragon, the dragon flame that's in there. So you have that, and then you spin. They were wound up. You could like spin the 2 discs, and then if you had the camera right in the middle, it would look like a tunnel of light, as it were, and it would look infinite. The thing with that was, the first version of it, I had just set up. I'd even just done a line of like Asteras and a line and put a chase in, and I wondered like how it just never felt infinite. Nothing felt infinite until we spun it around. Did it feel like, oh, this is how we get an infinite feel? At one point, we even discussed dropping the camera from the top of the studio down and having lights, float, like they would be on stands or floating in space that we'd go through. But again, that's a massive setup. When are we going to do it? So it was kind of all working together very much with the grip and gaffer to try and sort that. And the bonus of shooting in one studio for a lot of it is that, once we finished a day, or even sometimes at the weekend or before the morning, I would be able to test little pieces, or I could ask if certain people could stay behind and we'd do a little test. And it was kind of the way the film was made, because there's many elements. I mean, I was able to test the birth before, but obviously as we went into it, we wouldn't be able to do that, and it had to happen simultaneously, and there's so many elements, like down to like, how do you do the shot in the bin where she drops the substance in and it lands on the substance, like just things that you wouldn't, like the motorcycle.
What? Now that you bring that up, how did you do that?
That's done in reverse. That's reverse with like some wire with like fishing wire. So you basically get your final shot, and then you get the character.
That's less crazy than I thought it would be.
Yeah.
Just while we're here, how'd you do like the infinite shower shot?
Oh my God. So that was another one that was tested. The infinite shower shot, again, real, because some people think that's just did you not just put it in VFX? But no, obviously we had her shower, which plays a big part. All these spaces have quite a symbolic meaning. And then Corley was like, no, I want the infinite shower. It's got to be at least 3 times the size. So they built another version 3 times the size. And at first I was like, okay, so then we'll go up and we'll pass, the shower head.
Yeah.
And then Corley was like, no. I don't want there to be a shower head. And I was like, but hold on, there's a camera. There's probably going to have to be some light on there. And then how And it wasn't until I was like, so we need to figure that out, because how is it going to rain? And we actually built a shower head that goes around the lens, and it would rain down. But that looked too... So we tested that. That was the first day. It just looked fake, weirdly fake, or somehow it didn't... It was too perfect almost. So in the end, we ended up trying one where we then bagged the whole camera, bagged the little lights. It was with wires that it's going up. And we also had little supports coming out so the camera wouldn't like wobble, because it's such a straight kind of shot. And then it was almost like raining other shower heads above, right from the top. So it would all just rain down. And in a way, so it became like a whole rain shower. I really enjoyed that shot. Yeah, I think it was a great... Again, it was one that I think we tested 4 times before we landed on the ultimate way to do it.
Parth. Gee whiz, dude.
Gee willikers, Trent.
That was just part 1, right? We breaking this into 2 parts. We breaking this into 3 parts. What's the vibe?
Trent, I made the executive decision to split this into 2 parts.
Cool. I was hoping for that.
The interview lasted an hour long, and I was like, do we stretch this into 3? But I kind of felt like the listener would like 2 parts. 2 30-minute interviews rather than 3 20-minute interviews.
So after the interview concluded, I feel like we asked 2 really interesting questions that I wish we asked on the air. And just one was about what the Monstro Elisasu puppet was consisted of, and he explained it. Do you remember what the other one was? I don't know. Oh, he said the thing about the shrimp. Dennis Quaid.
Yeah, I mean, he sort of brought up this fun anecdote about Dennis Quaid and the shrimp eating scene. And
well, Parth was just like, I like the shrimp scene. And he was like, oh, the shrimp scene. We should have talked about the shrimp.
Yes. So out of respect for him, I'm going to bring it up. Basically, Dennis Quaid really, really likes shrimp. And even before they were all set up to do the scene, started eating some of the shrimp. And our guest, Benjamin Kraken, said, hey, maybe you want to chill out on that because you're going to be eating that all day. And you might get tired of it, and I don't want you to get sick or anything. And Dennis Quaid was like, "I love shrimp," and ate 4 kilos of shrimp.
Yeah, I don't even know what a kilo of shrimp would look like, but it's got to be a lot.
Let's search up how much 4 kilos into pounds. That's 8 pounds of almost 9 pounds of shrimp.
That's more. I honestly think that's more shrimp than I've eaten in my whole life.
It might be, yeah.
Well, thanks to Benjamin Kraken for... Oh, and think, guys, these few interesting tidbits were cut, but think about the stuff that's still waiting for you in part 2.
Yeah, I think part 2, we really get into the weeds and some interesting, stuff. I think our guest, Benjamin Kraken, saved the best for last. So make sure to check us out.
About halfway through, he was like, hey guys, since we're about halfway through this, I've said all the boring shit, and now let's fucking go!
Let's go sicko mode.
Yeah, like the Teslas go.
Thank you so much to Benjamin Kraken. Make sure you check us out next week for part 2. Where can you check us?
You can check us. Parth's a super cool young hip kid, if you can tell. You can just check us. Go ahead, check us out.
Check us out. All right, my bad.
No, Parth, I'm yanking your chain. Calm down.
Parth's famous nachos,
Parth's famous wings.
Oh my god, what the fuck?
I wonder what that's gonna sound like.
Probably terrible.
In the light of day. Okay, so on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Pandora, Stitcher, ?
Anywhere you get your podcasts is where they'll go up, and you can get our social media.
And we're not there, find us.
Okay.
Tell us how we can help you. If you need to borrow money, find Parth. If you're hungry, if you're homeless, find Parth. He wants to help you. He has unlimited resources. He's made this abundantly clear. He may disagree. That's just him being modest.
And you can check us out on social media at Instagram and
Check.
Twitter.
Check us.
Part says one stupid thing in 203 episodes.
No. I don't think you're stupid. So just check us out, Instagram, Twitter.
Yo, you can check us out on IG.
On IG, X, you can skibbity out on Fortnite.
We'll be interviewing the Rizzler.
Oh,
Big AJ, the Rizzler. Yeah. Ooh, it's really gone off the rails, hasn't it?
They're from Jersey.
Oh, I'm aware. I'm well aware.
Here's the unfortunate truth.
What are you about to say?
It's like, if we want this podcast to go anywhere,
We need to get the Rizzler on.
like, we better start sending emails.
Yeah.
So
next week is Benjamin Kraken, but the week after, we don't know what's happening. So,
literally true. Literally, I texted Parth the other day, and I was like, any interviews lined up? He's like, I'm working on it. Are you in the Rizzler's DMs? Or it's the Rizzler's PR person, who is like another little boy. He's like, I don't know, the Rizzler's really busy. I'll try to fill you in. He's really a wanted commodity these days because he has a water whiz. I don't know. Does AJ do? No, I'm kidding. Big AJ, Big Justice.
The Substance Part 2 out next week.
Isn't it kind of nice that they've involved Mama Justice and the sister?
Bye, guys. See you next week.
Can't you envision the family meeting?
Trent, please let me end this.
Like right after they started blowing up, and the mom and the sister were like, "You guys got to cut us in on this." Bye, guys.
What the fuck?